respect to water utilities. Each service stands on its own, so that's the difference between a RD. One of the big differences between an RD and a municipality is each service has its own budget, its own taxation, its own, basically almost its own funds. So if there's a deficit or surplus in one service, it can't be used elsewhere. The reason it's set up this way is most services, they all have a different set of tax ratepayers. So for instance, a water utility in Preston has a completely different set of ratepayers than a museum contribution service in Area K. Just some of the provincial regulations impacting the regional district, but the two main ones are the Local Government Act and Community Charter, which basically regulate local government, municipalities and RDs in British Columbia. So how are annual property taxes for regional district services calculated? So again, tax amounts are set to fund each service that are determined through the RD process, budget process, and separate from that, BC assessment, which is an arm of the provincial government, determines property assessment values, which are available at the beginning of January. So then we take the budget for each service divided by the assessment value, and we get the tax rate for each service. Again, the difference with the municipality is the municipality will have one tax rate for all their services. Regional district has one for each service. There are a few exceptions, but like parcel taxes, but for the most part, they're assessment based. And then so you multiply that by the assessed value of each individual property, and you get the property tax for each individual property for each service. So a little bit about this annual assessment change. So this is a change in assessed values. The blue bars are year over year, so change from 25 to 26. The orange bars are the 10-year average, going back 10 years. So we can see Area H and Silverton are to the left, so we're about a 3% increase. New Denver, about just under 2. So these are lower than the last few years. The average increase we've been running closer to 5 or 7, and now we're down to about 3. We've got K and Area I actually showing a decreased assessment value. So the financial plan is, I'm going to say, just over 200-page document is available online. Its 3 main sections are the taxation details by area municipality, which shows taxation changes over a 3-year period. We'll have a look at that. The summary, which compares all the rural areas and the municipalities, and then a detailed service statement for each service, which goes down to the account level and where the 5-year projections exist. And again, that's where the 180 services are. That makes up the bulk of the budget document. So here's the taxation detail for Area H. Again, 3 years showing assessment, requisition. There's that rate per 1,000, which differs for each service. The top half of this table, so above the subtotals, are the services that all ratepayers in Area H pay into. Doesn't matter where you're located. And the bottom are the list of the what we call defined area services. So only depends where you live, whether you pay into these services or not. And similar for New Denver. So these are the RDCK services that New Denver ratepayers pay into. There are no defined areas in New Denver, so every ratepayer, property owner in New Denver pays for all of these services. And then Village of Silverton, similar list. And again, the different rate per service, and then a regional requisition amount. This is what a rural property tax bill example looks like. This is from Area F. So in the red circled there, are the original district taxes. So F Central Kootenai are the services combined in where all the ratepayers pay into. So for area H, it would say H Central Kootenai. So that's the large amount. And then the defined area services are listed separately. So in this case, this property owner only pays into defined area for fire protection. And as you see on the tax bill, you also have school, hospital, provincial, and police taxes. So here's the summary table listing all the electoral areas, municipalities, showing the change in assessment. As we can see, area H just under 4%, just over under 4%. New Denver and Silverton between 2 and 3. And then on the far right is the net change in taxation expressed as a percentage. So 4.8% as a average across the whole regional district. Area H 8.4, New Denver 5.6, and Village of Silverton 11.1%. So jump into a 2026 overall outlook. So projected tax increase is 4.8% based on the latest budget. The previous budget had a 5.1% increase. I think back the first version we had was close to 9, so we're about 4 and a bit percent down from where we were a few months ago. So the $48.1 million in tax requisitions for this year for 2026 are actually $1.7 million lower than we had projected for this year in last year's budget. CPI increase on salaries and director stipends 2.5%. We've got some union positions that have 3.4 based on our collective agreement. Interest rates have continued to decrease into last year. It looks like they're holding steady now. So that's reduced some interest charges on short-term loans, but also reduced investment income. The recently announced provincial budget will have an impact on costs, but that's likely later this year, including the addition of PSD on some services. So this budget doesn't reflect any impact on the budget yet, so we're still looking at it. Some other challenges and opportunities, political climate, global conflict, foreign trade, including tariffs, counter tariffs, has been increasing procurement costs as a risk bill or go further. Supply chain issues as energy costs as well. I'm sure many of you noticed the price at the local gas stations has already started to climb. And if uncertainty continues, we've got potentially slowing economic activity, wider downturns, and effect on revenue for the regional district would be lower revenues in building permits, waste disposals, recreation fees, etc. Fluctuating Canadian dollar could also cause some inflation. And then last but not least, artificial intelligence. The technology is evolving quickly. Use at the regional district has increased, although I would still fairly limited. We've distributed AI guidelines to our staff, keeping in mind the accuracy and privacy concerns with AI tools. So we'll go through a few pie charts here. This is for the regional district as a whole, just to give a understanding of where the tax dollars go in the regional district as a whole. So 28% goes to the major rec facilities. That's the swimming or the aquatic center, arena, fitness centers in Nelson, Cascard, and Preston. That's 28%. And then other community services, parks and museums. You add those to rec facilities, where just over 40% for parks, recreation, and culture. Next comes fire and rescue, emergency management. If you add those up, fire and emergencies about 22, resource recovery, which includes waste management about 14, and then transit at about 6%. So this is a waterfall graph that shows where the taxation change was what makes it up from 25 to 26. So about a $2.7 million increase in taxation. So most came from rec facilities, fire rescue, and transit, as well as general event. I'll talk about that in a bit. And then resource recovery. And we've actually had a few groups where it's come down. So building inspection, taxation is down, as well as rural administration. And this next pie chart shows where the money is spent, where the funds are spent by expense type. So this excludes direct capital expenditures. This doesn't include buying vehicles or constructing assets. This is non-capital. So wages and benefits, 38%, services, contracted services, repairs, maintenance, accounting, legal, 18%. Reserve contributions are 13%. So reserve contributions are to fund future capital projects, repairs, replacement. So that's 13%. Debt servicing is 8%. Grants are 7%. Miscellaneous are 8%. The other terminology for funding future, managing future capital needs is asset management. So you'll hear that term being used more and more in local government, and we've actually have an allocation service specifically related to the cost of administrating asset management, but not the funding of it, which is new for 2026. And so where did it change in expense, non-capital expense charge, increase of almost $4 million? Where do those funds go? By far and large, most of it goes into reserve contributions, that increase was increased reserve contributions, then wages and benefits, maintenance, and miscellaneous, and then reductions in debt servicing, contracted services, and grants expense. Okay, before we jump into individual services, are there any questions? No? Okay, anybody got any questions anytime, please either put your hand up or either in person or online. So Service S100 is general administration. This is a region-wide service. So New Denver, Silverton, and H all participate in it. This includes corporate admin, finance, IT, HR, Office of CEO and municipal directors. You can see just under 19% taxation increase. What that's largely made up of, there's $263,000 less of surplus being carried forward into 26 than there was into 25. So there's less surplus available to reduce taxation. And then as well, about $130,000 in expenditures this year planned to migrate our accounting software to the cloud, as well as pay an increased annual fee for that. Housing availability still having some effects on our recruiting efforts. And then we've got a few other IT projects on the go. Next is rural administration, Service S101. So this is just Area H. So 22% taxation decrease. So this includes bylaw enforcement, noise, animal control, on-site nuisance properties, etc. Bylaws vary by electoral area, so there's not, depending where you live, there will be a different set of bylaws. Bylaw building managers shared between two services, which helps reduce some costs. There's some legal reviews of some of our bylaws happening this year, and then as well as some planning for new dog control services for areas A, B, C, and H. And rural directors are also, some of their costs are included in the service. And the other major change to this service this year is regional fire overhead, which looks after the 17 different regional district fire halls, has been moved to its own service, an allocation service A107. So those costs could be, there's more transparency there, and those costs could be shown on the road and not combined without bylaw. GIS, so this provides digital mapping services, landfill surveys addressing 911 data, evacuation mapping. So the picture on the picture on the right is a evacuation map from around Argenta Duncan Lake area from 2 summers ago. So this service is seeing 25% taxation increase with some required upgrades to its systems and some hardware. Working on NG 911 transition process. NG 911 is new generation 911, so that's basically moving from an analog-based service to a digital-based one, which at some point is going to give greater connectivity with the smartphones and other digital devices. And then also this service there's a correction from an undercharge from general admin fees last year. Building inspection so this is New Denver, Silverton, and H are all received building inspection services from the RDCK. Service S103, so it's seeing a 16% taxation decrease last year. Building permit revenue came in at just under $1 million versus a budget just over 900. So review and drafting of modernizing the building bylaws planned this year, archiving project, as well as some new software for plan checkers and replacing 2 end-of-life vehicles. Planning and land use.
Yeah.
Yes.
Question about the 911.
Yes.
Is that separate from funding the 911 service itself? The NG 911?
Yes, so GIS gets funding from the 911 service to do its work. So NG 911 is funded. The migration through it is funded through the 911 service, which I will talk about later. So then through grants and other funds, GIS is heavily involved in helping that transition. Yeah. Planning and land use responsible for administration of zoning land use development application, long-term community plans, and administrating those bylaw standards and policies. Inflationary rate increase this year of 3%. This service gets a fair amount of provincial funding, grant funding for items as set in addressing new housing regulation, updating. There will be some updating of bylaw, other regulations, and OCP updates worked on this year in Service S104. And this is just Area H. So between New Denver to look after their own plan. So West Resource Recovery, Service S188, the regional district is broken up into three different resource recovery subregions. Regional district looks after all of the landfills in the regional district, transfer stations, etc. So the West Service 188 starts in Castlegar, goes through areas I, J through H, and Slocan, New Denver, Silverton, all the way to the cusp. It includes transfer stations, recycling depots, landfills, and as well as the transportation of materials. It's seeing a 8% taxation, 6.4% tipping fee increase. The cusp landfill is being transitioned to a transfer station, some renovation work in the cusp. Legacy landfill closure plans. Regional district is responsible for closing and doing assessments on landfills that even existed and were closed before the RD was formed or over the past how many years. So this includes Burton, Edgewood, Roseberry, and Slocan. Commercial organics regulation being phased in, as well as some rural organics diversion or initiatives beginning. A major project at the Shannon landfill, which is the primary landfill for West and Central right now. It is having some work done in new scale tipping areas, and then some work being done for request of interest for eco depots in Castlegar and the cusp. So jump over to parks, service S203, covers, New Denver, Silverton, Silverton, and, olive area H, so it's seeing a proposed taxation increase of, just under 4%. So there are 5 parks in this area, Bigelow, Crescent Valley Beach, Rosemary Parklands, Rosemary 3 Parks Regional Trail, and Winlaw, Regional and Nature Park. So those are the 5 parks. And so that Crescent Valley Beach square below is basically the one major project being done in this to these 5 parks this year or planned. So addition of a new trail down to the main park and beach. And there's ongoing maintenance in all the other parks. And so including regular monitoring and maintenance to keep all parks and trails operation. Next, we have parks from a regional perspective. So there's a parks, trails, and water access strategies being worked on to define priorities, policies, and direction. This project began in 2024 with anticipated completion this year. The final report to be reviewed by the board, followed by external review and public engagement. And then for recreation, we have service 229. Which the Denver Silverton area H A into, actually seeing a taxation decrease of 4% this year, so just around $50,000. So this service offers things like state courses, summer camps, sponsors swim to survive programs and other programs and events, and as well as youth safety programs. Some highlights are equipment rentals, recreation grants, and then a third-party booking system was implemented at the New Denver gymnasium. So jump over to what we call contribution services. So these are services that the regional district does not manage or provide, but it provides grants individually through these services. So the cemetery service is seeing an inflationary increase. The ski hill or Summit Ski Hill is basically in its maximum allowed for a taxation. So it's staying at $20,000. We are looking at increasing that amount, but it's a bit of a process to do that. And so this ski hill also includes areas K and the cusp. And then finally, we have the TV Society with the inflationary increase just up to $25,000 in 2026. Lawn water utility area H North, Roseberry Water, 5% parcel tax increase and 5% user fee increase, 2% for undeveloped parcels. We'll jump into emergency planning for this area. S161, so this service is shared between Silverton, and New Denver. So the regional district has what we call an allocation service where all the emergency planning and management costs are gathered. And then from that A service, those costs are allocated out to I believe 7 different emergency planning services throughout the region. So the service S161 is seeing a 2% taxation increase in 2026. The main primary work emergency management is working on is implementing the new Emergency and Disaster Management Act, otherwise known as EDMA. This includes updating plans, risk assessments, business continuity plans, multi-jurisdictional planning, aligning bylaw policy procedures and templates, and then expansion of the neighborhood emergency preparedness program, as well as Indigenous engagement. The emergency management group is also working on expanding emergency support services, upgrading their systems, as well as rolling out fire smart programs. So the key thing to understand about emergency planning, so what this taxation for the emergency planning does is basically all these things regarding setting up all the planning and all the systems. When there's actually a state of emergency in place, whether it's for fire or flooding or whatever, then the government, the provincial government kicks in funding to cover those direct emergency related expenses. But any planning or mitigation work is funded through taxation. 911 communications, so this is service S-156, region-wide, except for the 3 municipalities, three larger municipalities. And so 5% taxation increase this year is driven both by rising costs, declining revenue. Where the revenue is declining is there's a 911 levy on landlines. So as landline use is reduced, there's less taxation available. Local governments have been lobbying both the provincial and federal government to get 911 user fees added to mobile phones, but they have not been successful yet. So there's some other costs. There's a bit of a decrease in general admin fees, and expenditure increases are primarily to higher contracted services costs for 911 dispatch, which is in the central Okanagan, and then fire dispatch, which is in Fraser, Fort George. Here's what we talked a bit about earlier. This service is funding $62,000 in GIS services to support the integration of NextGen 911. We also have a few capital projects planned for this year to upgrade mainly hardware related to radio repeater antennas. Fire emergency response staff have access to dispatch where there's areas don't have cell coverage.
Yeah,
Yes.
what's the main barrier from collecting fees from the mobile users?
Federal and provincial legislation.
They say they can't?
Well, we don't collect a 911 fee ourselves.
Yeah.
So there's the telephone providers, landline, so TELUS collects the fees and then we get money from TELUS for that, for landlines. So their legislation is not in place for them to collect it from, there isn't federal or provincial legislation in place to collect it from smartphones. So we can't go collect it ourselves.
Even though, like, say we use TELUS,
Yes.
smartphone?
Yeah, even though we use TELUS,
Legislation.
so there's no legislation in place that says TELUS you need to collect 911 fees on mobile phones. So the local government has been lobbying, I don't know how many years now, to change that, and both directly and through UDCM, and that hasn't happened. I don't think anywhere across the
No, but on Canada, it's federal legislation that hasn't been passed.
yeah.
And I think Director or Leah can probably add to that. They've been working on that for quite a while.
Okay.
The wheels turn slowly.
All right, next we have fire protection services, area H / New Denver. So area H is a regional district provided fire service, but this is Slocan and area and south. I put it in this presentation just in case there's any Slocan residents here. So that service is seeing a 4.3% increase, and some committee works funded work there. New engines coming for Winlaw that in 2027 deposit happening this year. The rural residents around New Denver receive fire services from New Denver via service S-140, and that's seeing a 3% inflationary taxation increase in 2026 currently. And last but not least is transit. A few things to talk about here. So service S-239 called Kootenai Lake West, which is a bit of an odd name because this service 239 covers everything to Nakaske and down to Castlegar. It's like one of the main services. We have four other transit services. There's lots of overlap, and prior to this year, there was a lot more, I wouldn't say confusion, less transparency around these services. So S239 used to have a really complicated formula for allocating the cost to the municipalities and rural areas, and it was really difficult to say, oh, if we took service away here, added it here, it would be really difficult to predict how and where who would actually end up paying for it. So about 2 years ago, the transit committee said that we need to fix this, and a consultant was engaged through a grant process, went through and offer, I think, 3 or 4 options for apportioning, improving the apportionment formula. So to something that made more sense, is more easy to understand that. But a few things happened there, and I'll get that reapportionment in a bit. So what happened? One thing that's this service is seeing a fairly substantial increase in taxation this year, and that's driven by a few factors. One was last year the last bit of reserve funding was used to reduce taxation in the service. So the service has built up a fairly substantial amount of reserves through the pandemic COVID area, where the provincial government wanted to ensure transit services kept going. So some of those funds are put in reserve, so those are all used up now. So taxation's made the jump to the actual cost providing service. Some reapportionment basically said S239 service you needs to pay into S238. So some of that increase is funded by that, as well as BC Transit has increased in cost of providing the service. So the regional district doesn't run its own buses. It contracts through BC Transit. And this is a reminder that the provincial government covers roughly half the cost for BC Transit providing that bus service. The rest is covered mostly through taxation and a bit through ridership fees. So Area H is seeing a 34% increase. New Denver 26 and Silverton 33 for this service, which is smaller than the average. So it means other areas are seeing a larger increase. Health Connections funding is in good notes, increasing by 33% from IHA for 3 years. And then there's an ongoing service review and optimization in progress.
Yeah,
Yes.
along with this fairly substantial increase in cost and taxation, what is the status of the service we're receiving? Is that increased concomitantly with the increase in taxation?
Sorry, what's that question?
What service are we getting for that increase of roughly 30% in taxation?
It's basically the same services as before. Again, it's basically there's no the reserves were used up, so it's moved to its cost level, and there's increases from BC Transit.
Thanks. I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, there's there's still an overall service reviews in process. So there might be potential changes in the future. So if there's routes that do not make sense anymore, or some runs get reduced, then taxation will get reduced for those areas that will see that reduced service. Or if there's a new service that's required, or some extra routes required, then taxation will increase. So there's an ongoing service review in place. Okay, I think that's the last of the services, so we'll jump into the pie charts for each of the municipalities and Area H. So this is for the Village of New Denver for the regional district portion of the taxes. So on the right is a pie chart showing where those funds go. Coot West there is the transit service. So that's the largest amount, or largest portion. And then next is we have Regional Parks and the Recreation Commission. And then next would be refuse or resource recovery, and then going down from there. And so per $100,000 of home value, that translates roughly to $90, close similar to what it was last year. So if you own a home that's worth $600,000, multiply that by 6, so just about $550 of regional district taxation. Silverton a little bit higher per 100,000, just around $100 per thousand. Again, transit's the largest, followed by recreation and parks, and then general admin, building inspection, and waste. And then next we have Area H North, where you receive fire protection from the Village of New Denver. That is the largest portion of your tax bill, and then followed by a bunch of services about the same portion, including those parks, emergency planning, resource recovery, general admin, etc. And now your tax bill is slightly larger, what, 150. So you live in a $600,000 home, you're about $900 per year of tax. And then Area H North, if you live outside the fire protection boundary, you're about $100 per thousand. $100 per 100,000 of taxation. And here, the taxation bill is broken out into a whole bunch of relatively similar sized chunks for parks, recreation, general admin, planning, and resource recovery and building inspection. Okay, that's the end of the presentation. So are there any other questions or comments from the audience online or directors? Okay, not hearing any other comments, then we'll conclude the meeting for this evening. And thank you everyone for coming, and those online for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Don't make it safe.
We will.
I hear it's bad up there.